right, hello everybody. Here with Jake and Greg, co-founders of SpecStory. So I'm pretty excited about this um, because SpecStory, I think, is the company that is like furthest along or most mature in how they use AI to code, which makes sense because they're also building tools to help people that use AI to code. Um, and yeah, they've built everything from commercial products that they offer, in-house tools, cloud services. Throughout the course, you've heard me talk about SpecStory a lot because I use it all day, every day. I use their cloud, I use their API, I use their extension locally. I use it as tools. I use it manually. I use it all, and so I've found it very useful myself. And then for the stuff that's out there today, and they've got a lot of stuff that's being built that's you know I want them to build it faster because I really want to use it. So it's all great. So if you're feel free to ask questions throughout in the Discord. If you want to ask verbally, just do the hand raising thing as normal. There'll be some natural breaking points, so we'll probably hold and then call on you when we get to those points. But raise your hand and then we'll call on you then. So without any more waiting, I'll pass it over to Jake and Greg.
Thanks, Isaac. Yeah, I appreciate the intro. And hello, everyone. Happy to be here. And we'll make sure to talk almost exclusively about things you can do today that have nothing to do with SpecStory, because as excited as we are about our products, we're more excited about what's happening in general with AI-assisted and agentic coding. And I think some of what we'll talk about today, not just talk about, but demo, we'll get to pretty quickly, is what it takes to go uh, from vibe coding to vibe coding reflection, meaning uh, I think you've experienced a big part of plan-driven or spec-driven development. We'll do a bit of that with a demo again today just to reinforce it. But the more important thing I think we'll spend time on is what happens at the end of each cycle, at the end of each session. What can you do in order to preserve the intent that you've built up along the way and fed in as context to the agents? Because you can use that to help future you or to help teammates that you might be working with get a better understanding of all the decisions that you made along the way and why you made them. And so just really quick background, I'm Jake Laverne, co-founder of SpecStory along with Greg. And we've spent a lot of time working on dev tools and we love helping people build things. But the thing we'll focus on today is the simple spec-driven flow for building out an application. We'll build out a static block generator as our sample. But the important thing, because I think you've seen it often, plan and execute, of course we'll do, but this reflect step, what can we do at the end of a session or even weeks after a session in order to look back and understand what we decided and why during that. And just to get at some of the reasons why you might care about this, if you don't preserve the intent behind your AI coding sessions, you run the risk of losing the why behind the code. So of course, the code will always be there. You'll use Git and probably GitHub and other ways to share the code. But the problem is the code alone doesn't reflect all of the intention that you had behind it. And so when you want to pick that same project up weeks later or share that project with somebody else, you really need to get at that intent. And so let's just dive in rather than looking at slides and talking. And we'll get started on a new project. We're going to do AI-assisted development. We'll use Claude Code for this one, but we like to use a bunch of different tools, including Codex and others.
Can you
And we'll
zoom in
start.
just once?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Good thought. And we'll start with a spec-driven or plan-driven flow. I know you all have seen a bunch of sort of spec-driven approaches before. I think maybe even talked a little bit about SpecFlow, which is just what we put pen to paper on. We'd love people to jump in and contribute here. We're happy to continue to grow and shape SpecFlow, but I'm going to focus in on one key piece of this. If you go to the SpecFlow templates like the SpecFlow GitHub and go into the templates, there's two sets of templates that are just going to make your life a lot easier in terms of doing spec-driven development and in terms of doing reflection on the decisions you made along the way. And so we'll start with the spec-driven development piece. We really, for the starter template, keep it as simple as possible. There's brainstorming, specking, and tasks. That's all there is. And brainstorming is really just the prompt to you as a human, not the AI prompt, to just start thinking out loud about what it is that you want to build. And we've got a bunch of questions to attempt to inspire that. And so um, usually I end up creating a brainstorm markdown document and then just typing away. Let me get some of this out of the way here. Zoom control is always where you don't want them to be. And just start typing away. And sometimes I even like to make use of something like Super Whisper to say that we want to create a simple static blog generator. We'll have it read in Markdown files, convert them into HTML, publish them in blog format, right? Like that is another way. We've got people that we work with that have spent, see, is this going to insert for me if I want? Make sure. There we go. We've got people that we work with that sometimes will end up talking for 3, 4, 5 minutes, right? Just giving background and context of what it is that they're trying to build. And this free form type of brainstorming is a great way to get started because it lets you get those ideas out. So we're good here. We want to create, simple static, convert them. It's good enough, right? Like for at least this sample application, this will get us where we're going. And so let's save that. And now if we come back to those SpecFlow templates after brainstorming, the next thing that we want to do is spec. And here what we're providing is a copy and paste prompt that you can use that'll take you from brainstorm to spec in a way that is going to get you to a spec that's matched up with the type of project you're building, the form factor, the level of fidelity, right? All of these things that maybe it's easy to overlook, but are absolutely critical to get the agent on course, right? And so that prompt, as I copied it, has a bunch of placeholders for us to answer. We're going to go through those placeholders, but while we're doing that, we might as well get Claude working in the background on the already completed version of this prompt. So this is a little bit of baking show, swap one into the oven, but there, we'll just get Claude firing in the background while we talk through what this prompt, the spec prompt is meant to do.
And
So
one
the
thing,
spec prompt,
sorry to jump in just really quickly. One thing I'll mention is we talked some about like tools that like auto make a spec for you and how if it just like fully automates that away too much, that it's that I don't like them personally. So this is like a template that I really like because like it's markdown. You have full control still. So you're not relinquishing that control over what you're saying.
yeah, that's exactly it, Isaac. Like I said, I wanted to make sure there were things that you could use and apply today and that you have that degree of control over. And so, you can make this prompt, the spec prompt your own, but some things that we've learned from just iterating through this so often from building our own applications is it's useful to be able to give some upfront, right? Like, so my app is for who, maybe it's for technical writers to let them easily publish blog posts, right? And I won't go through all this right now, but each piece is kind of important, right? The fidelity of the application. AI agents will often assume the wrong level of fidelity. They'll almost always assume that you're trying to build something production grade. They'll end up creating a set of tasks that might match up with a production grade application, including security and vulnerability and all the things that you might want to do in a real app. But if you're just prototyping, you want to make sure you let the AI know that, right? And so the fidelity of the application is important. The form factor, deciding on this upfront and early also matters. Again, agents are going to make some assumptions. If they go completely down the wrong path here and build out a mobile blog generator, that's not going to make sense for you, right? So you want to be clear on form factor up front. And we can keep going through like the most important features. But one of the other things we've got in the template that's pretty helpful is if you need help answering any of the blanks, right? Like if you need help with brainstorming users and needs, or you need help with brainstorming the most important features of your application, we've got subprompts for those, right? So as we talk about, for example, brainstorming important features, you can just take this prompt here. And again, based on our experience, we've run product teams and eng teams in the past. Um, it's this type of thinking that can help you get at the real core features that are actually the important starting point, right? And so using this, you can have a pretty great conversation with Claude or Cursor or Codex, any of them, about getting to that list of just 3 or 4 or 5 at most important features for your app. But we've already done that in this case. So the prompt that I fed in had a set of key features. We can make sure we show them here. Yeah, here we go, right? So we chose reading markdown files in, converting them to HTML, saving output to a build directory, including basic config.json for site metadata, right? So we've done that already, but again, those prompts to help you brainstorm. And then 2 more thoughts here. You don't have to choose your language up front. I mean, of course, the agent will make a choice, but if you've got some preferences, or if you're working with especially a set of packages or libraries already that you care about, you can define your choices up front. We do that. And packages and libraries, another surprisingly good place to do some upfront investment. Turns out, like for one of the apps that we were building, markdown editing was a key feature. There was a pretty good half-day research session, maybe not half day, 2-hour research session that I did of the various packages and libraries and services that are out there for markdown editing. And that exploration alone, playing with samples and demos from open source projects, it's a pretty valuable way to even learn about and refine maybe the important features of the application you're building. And then when you do that, you may have come to a choice of a given package or library, and you should specify that. But let's say that we are in good enough shape here. We already fed this in up front and asked it to create a spec for us. And I think because we gave it some strong guidance there, hopefully we have a pretty clean and simple spec. So the other piece of this that's not going to come across as well as it should in this demo is it's actually important to read all these artifacts that you're producing. And this is now the point of control exertion for you. And I think that's a lot of what we've learned over time is like there are new points to exert control. We used to do it as software engineers at the line level of code, but the spec itself, the task list that we're about to create, and the decision artifacts that we'll create in retrospect are really important to read through and make sure that you understand and agree with the decisions that are being made or that have been made. So we won't do that justice, but just to make that point, and I've actually built this app a few times, so I'm pretty confident that Claude does almost exactly the same thing each time. But we'll take this spec now, and our next step is to break this into a task list. Of course, if I just feed this in, like if I just tell Claude to implement this, of course it will do its own planning, and you'll be able to see that here. But I much prefer to have my plan, my tasks in front of me in Markdown again, so that I can do that thoughtful review and tweak it. So one more sample prompt template, and this is the prompt that'll convert a spec into a task list. And again, based on experience, both using AI coding agents, but also running teams, one of the most important things is to get clarity of focus. It's very easy to want to boil the ocean up front. Instead, what we do with this prompt is try to get the agent to take our spec and turn it into a task list that's a very focused one, a prioritized one that identifies agent versus human tasks, and one that can be completed in a session. So we'll use this prompt template. I think I probably already have it over here, but our tasks prompt will say, based on my current spec, right, help me identify just the right next chunk of work. I can tell it the state of my project. I can tell it again, target fidelity, just because it's often where it goes off the rails. We'll take all this, I'll feed that in as our next prompt. And from this, it'll run through that spec and end up generating tasks for me. now's a natural stopping point. I'll just see if any questions have queued up, anything we want to discuss while we're waiting for that. All good? Okay. Keep rolling then. So
Yeah, there's one question on using the chat history, like how you use it and as it's set up. I think at the end there'll be talk about actually using these. So we will get there. We're
yes.
not ignoring that question, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
going
we'll
to be
definitely.
part. So we'll resurface that when we get there.
Yeah, yeah. So let's keep rolling. And one of the ways we're going to use it is in the same way that we are just looking at. There are prompts, like prompt templates that we'll use for deriving valuable artifacts off of the chat history. So great. I've gone from brainstorm to spec to tasks. Like I said, I like to keep my tasks in a place that I can read them. So write this to tasks.md. And then we'll choose the first subset of these tasks to get working on. And if we've succeeded in our focusing prompt, we might even be able to choose all the tasks at once. So let's see what we got to here. We got to, we're at the very beginning. Yeah. High value focus, most valuable work, proving your technical assumptions. Okay, create basic project structure, a minimum markdown to HTML converter, sample blog post, basic HTML template, test the end-to-end workflow. Yep, that's exactly what we want to do. So given this, let's get started. I can reference it in a bunch of ways. I could just reference the file. I could drop all of this in. So let's implement, whoops, let's see there. Let's implement this. If I had made changes, right, of course, it's important to let it know that here are the changes that I've made, or reread the file and process those changes. You could even decide to start a new clean session. You've got plenty of context. You can load back in the spec and the tasks, and that'll get you going on this project. So that's another nice thing about keeping everything in your markdown. Okay, this is going to go off and end up building at least this first pass of a static blog generator that will take Markdown from one directory, right? Like I'll write my posts in Markdown and it'll process them into HTML in another directory, and then that HTML could easily be pushed to any static site. And this is the kernel, right? We of course could build on top of this. And building on top of this could look like going back through that same planning-based or spec-driven workflow that we just saw. So for example, if we want to add in something richer, like an organizational overview page of our blog, like a home or an index, or if we want to add searching, right? Like those might be big enough to warrant creating a whole new spec for those features. But also there's times, and this is the value of using synchronous agents, but there's times that that I just want to interact and iterate a little bit in order to make progress. Okay, so here's a good example. Python import, yep. Now I think we're getting some errors here. And the problem, and I catch this, is that like it's trying to use Python directly and pip3 directly, and my whole environment for Python is virtualized. And so I can course correct here. Again, one of the benefits of using synchronous agents. So for this project, use UV. You may all know UV is a great tool for managing both requirements and virtual environments for your project, for your Python project. So now hopefully we'll get better results. And this is an example of something that I did on the fly, right? Like I'm incrementally nudging the agent to use UV rather than coming all the way back around, changing my spec, updating it. I mean, something, again, naturally you would do. It's this give and take between plan-based work and ad hoc work. And we'll see in actually just a few minutes where that matters, especially when you're trying to reflect. So it's through, it's made, it's done its implementation. it's following those last two steps, update the spec and create the README, which was part of our template in general for task creation, which is great. But let's see if it did something interesting. So we had a post, it created a sample hello world markdown post for me. It ran the build for me. Let's take a look at what it ended up spitting out. Yeah, reasonable first start. And of course, there are lots of things that I might want to do to this, including styling and index page, but we've at least got the kernel of an idea going here. So let's pop back in here as it finishes up. So major steps, right? Plan, implement, reflect. So part of reflecting is exactly what we just did, right? Part of reflecting is making sure that our task list includes the idea of keeping our specs and other artifacts up to date, keeping our documentation up to date. And this is an easy way to reflect. And again, it could be through the task list, or of course you could just prompt it to do these things, but then you have to remember. But the other way, that's sort of an interesting way to reflect, is to either now at the end of a session or weeks from now when you're trying to pick a project back up, reflect back on those chat histories, this whole conversation that you had. And this is something you can use SpecStory to do today. It's a free tool, as Isaac mentioned. And we'll take a look at what those histories could be really useful for. So let's just make sure we did the sync first. So we can use, yeah, we'll use this one. Claude's being finicky today with these warm-ups, so I'm sure we'll get some warm-up based chat histories, but that's okay. So SpecStory sync in here. I could have run SpecStory run and it would have auto synced as Claude was running, but I can always run it after the fact too. Except just be careful. Claude has a default where it will get rid of all of your Claude session history after 30 days. So make sure you run your SpecStory sync at least in that time window. And we're just going to end up getting a nice clean markdown file of everything that happened in that session, including some things that happened behind the scenes, like Claude Code now warms up and uses Haiku as like a sidechain agent or a sub agent to do some of its tasks. So it does that warm up, but then pretty quickly you can see my first query, right? The prompt where I was getting that spec generated and goes through and does that. And then find the next user task. I ask it to identify the right next chunk of work and create my tasks for me, right? So all of this is now preserved in this chat history. So what might I want to use this for? So one of the things that we end up using this for is for helping as we share code with each other, or helping as we go back in time and look at work that we've done. So let's talk about sharing code with each other. So if we come into these templates now that we were just looking at and jump over to the SpecFlow decisions templates, archaeology is one of the ways we think about this. So let's say I've done a bunch of work like I just did. I'm working with somebody else and I want them to be able to review what I've done. Of course, can push the code to them through GitHub. But I also want to give them a better understanding of what happened and the why behind my process. And especially if they're asking questions, I want to be able to answer the questions that they're asking in a code review. And so this is a simple archaeology process that we use that lets you go back through your artifacts, including your chat history, gather them up and use them to answer questions about why, about the intent behind some of your choices. And so step one is to identify and gather relevant development artifacts, and then we're going to do some extraction on them. We're going to analyze for the parts that might be useful for answering a specific set of questions, and then prepare a response. So there are a couple of ways that we could do this. Discovery and collection is just gathering up the artifacts. In our sample, it's going to be really easy. We just have the one chat history and a specific set of artifacts that we've created. For more complex projects, obviously where you've been doing multiple sessions, or you've got multiple team members doing multiple sessions, we have built out a tool to make it easy to gather those all up into one place. So SpecStory Cloud is again a piece of our free offering that allows you to back up all your chat histories to the cloud and then search across them, right? So I didn't think those yet, but maybe from a past project. Let's see this. Yeah, well, so I just did one, the static blog. So from this, I could just say like uh, blog generator histories. I could do a search or a chat against them. If I just do a search, I'll end up narrowed down. Whoops, blog generator. Narrowed down to only those chat histories that contain the term blog generator. There's a lot more I can do here, but ultimately what you're trying to do is gather up just the right set of histories that matter for the given um, the given review that you're trying to do. So in our case, we've pulled together the one chat history that makes sense. If there were more, we could have them all here in this directory. Now we're just going to start to do some extraction against them. And extraction doesn't have to be anything more complicated than running an agent again. So we could just use Claude. We could use, again, any of the other agents, but we're now going to switch from coding mode to analysis mode, and we're going to work against this chat history. So what are we trying to do with this chat history? In our case, right, if I'm sharing this set of changes with Greg because I want him to be able to review it, one of the things that's pretty critical is for him to understand all the decisions that went into this. And some of the decisions are ones that I made explicitly in my specking and my brainstorming. Some are decisions that were made by the agent, but all of those are important. And so back on our SpecFlow templates for this extraction and timeline, we can use what we call a decision spec. And a decision spec is just a specification for pulling out decisions, whether they be architectural decisions, product decisions, design decisions from your SpecStory chat history. And so I've got this spec already here in my project, the decision spec. And we're just going to use this as is and tell Claude to review the specific transcripts that we care about. So in this case, I'll point it to the one. You could point it to the whole directory. Sometimes it helps to process transcripts one session at a time. But for this whole session, we'll say review that. And then based on decision spec, let's extract decisions that were made and write them to decisions.markdown. And so what this is doing is sicking Claude Code on this desire to pull out all of the decisions. So requirements decisions, architectural design decisions, strategy decisions, any decisions that might be there in that chat history. And while that's doing that, maybe we're at a natural pause or stopping point to see if there are other questions that might be coming up.
There are some in the Discord, but I've been typing answers furiously as you've been talking, so
Any of them worth
on
talking
time.
about? Why don't you pick one and share it? We can talk about it too as a group.
Well, it's less fun if I pick the question that someone else asked. I mean,
I'll pick. I can pick. So I think a lot of them are around yeah, so like I think some of them are around how do you pick, and this has kind of been a common theme, when you're making a plan or a task or whatever, like how do you pick how big it should be versus small it should be? Like, should it just be the next two steps? Should it be the next 100 steps? Like, how do you think about like what can fit in a plan or in a spec or in whatever?
Yeah, and I'm sure Greg was probably chiming in Discord with thoughts. I've got one that I'll share and we'll open it up. I like to pick a session's worth of tasks. It's nice to have a fixed box. For me, a session is somewhere between an hour and a day at most, right? Like it's essentially one unbroken conversation that I'm going to have, even if it's spread out over time. The nice thing about choosing a fixed time box is it forces you to make trade-offs. I mean, the real problem is trying to build everything all at once, as opposed to working incrementally. So you pick a fixed time box, it's a nice way to create a natural bound. That's why I like it. But I think there are other approaches. I don't know, Isaac or Greg, thoughts?
Yeah, for me, I think of it as I want to define things that I like. I don't want to write a plan or a spec for something that is probably just going to change and be wrong. And the further in the future it is, the more likely it will have changed by then. So if I think about like, okay, I need to build, like I might have a very clear idea of what the next thing I want to build is, and maybe even the next five things. But if it's like, here's the next 100 things that need to happen, number 100 is probably just going to be, it's probably going to, something's going to have changed by then, almost certainly. And so I try and think of it a lot in terms of like, well, how much do I understand? Um, and how likely, like, if it's too far in the future, I'm like, well, that's probably gonna, like, I can define a spec, but by the time I get there, I'll probably have changed some dependencies. I might have switched things out. I might have decided that my design wasn't actually a good one. Like, so I try and keep them, fairly small in scope to like what I'm doing today as much, I think much the same as you were saying.
Yeah.
Nico?
Yeah, I have a quick question. If you use your basically your conversation histories for proper error analysis or systematic error analysis, it sounds like you put a lot of thought into the prompts and how you structure them. Is that how you basically improved engineered your prompts?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple aspects of error analysis, or in general getting the agent to stay on the right course. One is upfront thinking and structured prompting. I think it does help a lot. So everything that we used to generate the spec and the task list is fairly structured, and it just represents some hard-won lessons about what happens when you don't do it. I mean, it's just so many times that I've not specified a fidelity and it's gone off and come up with a very messy spec because it's way over engineering things. Um, so yeah, structured prompting helps. I think the other thing though, I think maybe Greg's a bit of a master of this, is like semi-active monitoring of what the agent is doing, because it's easier to course correct early rather than to let it get far down the line. Greg, do you want to share any of the ways that you sort of keep the agent on the rails in a synchronous or interactive way in addition to structured prompting?
Yeah, I mean, as you asked that question, Nico, I was curious, like, or were you talking about more from like, I'm building a product with agents and I want to like evaluate its performance? Or when you're talking about like error analysis, do you mean just through a reflection process that you're engaging in to sort of drive better coherence the next time you're building software with an agent?
Yeah, evaluate and improve the accuracy or to stay on track.
Yeah, I mean, I think like I haven't done anything sort of super robust in terms of like going past like through past transcripts to like kind of understand had I like prompted differently with a different model or provided different context, like would I have gotten a more effective outcome? Primarily just because, the state of this industry is moving so quickly. Like,
Mhm.
if I went back a month from now, it's probably a bunch of stuff I'd built with like a completely separate CLI and a completely different frontier model. So I don't know how helpful that would be. But I do think that one of the benefits of like having these logs, and it's relevant like for stuff I have built is like if you put down a project and then you want to kind of understand, for example, like decisions you made, but it's kind of fuzzy because you were moving at a sort of speed or pace that was much faster than you would have memorialized had you written the code yourself. That's where I've sort of gotten the most value out of doing something like what Jake just showed, sort of more robustly over a very large corpus of sessions, so that I could like reprime my own brain if I wanted to go back to something I had built like some time ago, if that helps.
And And do you log the tool calls in your, are they in your logs? Yeah.
Yeah, you'd get the like full fidelity of sort of everything.
Okay. And Cloud Code makes this compression, this automated compression, right? Once the context wilderness fills up. Do you see that? Can you? Yeah.
Yeah, because even though it compresses, what that really is doing is it's leaving the current session intact. It's creating a compressed summary of it to seed the
Yeah.
next session. And so again, as long as you run SpecStory before Claude prunes its sessions, which is by default at 30 days,
Yeah.
as long as you've run SpecStory, yeah, you'll get both the original session, you'll get the new session, including the summary that was used
Okay.
in the previous
Cool.
compression.
And you
Thanks.
can change the default behavior for how long like Claude or probably most agents like keep their logs in their specific like dot directory.
Yeah, it's a good tip. We should all do it because space is cheap, but memory is hard. Um,
Thanks.
yeah. Yeah, so with this, right, this was us running that last prompt, right? The decision extraction prompt against our SpecStory history. And it pulls out some basic things, right? Using Python as the primary language. Fine, that's not that interesting. But maybe here's one that is more interesting. So this is not a choice that we ever made. I never said, hey, Claude, use the Python standard Markdown library for doing Markdown to HTML conversion. It made that choice. And now the nice thing is that that choice is exposed as a decision. And this just gives me the chance to review the decisions, right? Whether they were my own from weeks ago or colleagues, because I'm looking at their code and coding session or the agent's choices. And so based on this, I might even decide to spike and head down another path where I use another agent to actually do this analysis, right? So nice thing about having all these documents is we can pop anywhere we want, right? I mean, we just jump into ChatGPT and use GPT-5 and say, for this project, we made this decision. Okay, let's see, where was our decision? Make this decision. Great. Help me assess whether that was the best and what alternatives I might use. And it'll go off and it'll do its GPT-5 thing. And of course, I could have just thrown this back into Claude or into Codex. So sometimes it's kind of nice to triangulate with multiple models on a choice like this, especially if it's one that's either high impact or one that I'm unsure about and need to learn a lot more about. But while that's off thinking about that, we can also look at other choices that I made or it made. For example, it implemented a simple string templating system to replace placeholder text like the date. So that's kind of interesting, right? Like this review back, especially if I was letting that last session run sort of without a lot of oversight, which I just was, right? Like we didn't read everything that came out of Claude. This type of summary is really nice, including the fact that it caught things that were not in the original and upfront spec, but that I decided along the way, like using UV for Python dependency management. So this is an example of the power of using SpecStory chat history, again, either for yourself when you work on this project again in the future, or when you're sharing this project with somebody else, right? It's like a compressed version of that chat history you had. And I mean, you know, it's sizable, 400 lines, 500 lines, but not inscrutable as opposed to the chat history itself, which is a lot to deal with. Let's see what GPT-5 thought. So was Python Markdown the best fit? It thinks yes. Simple, reliable, minimal dependencies. It's not strictly common mark GFM by default, right? So now it's really interesting. I mean, if I didn't know, this is something interesting to either follow up and ask about, or heck, maybe even go back to Google like the old days and figure out what this means. Common mark. Interesting, right? So it turns out there are a bunch of extensions to Markdown. Of course, I know this from having had to build a Markdown editor from scratch, but if you didn't, this sort of clues you in on things that you could be exploring that you might not have even thought about. And so this becomes the work, right? I mean, the work used to be line by line code reviews, but now I think of it more as decision by decision intent reviews. And that's what this workflow that we were talking about and these templates that we've shared kind of make it possible to do. And a lot of what we're doing at SpecStory is now trying to make this much easier to do. You saw there's a ton of copying and pasting and moving stuff around. And I've got now 12 markdown files in here. We want to make that a lot easier, but the fundamental flow is one that anybody can do with any agent. Let me pause here and see if this brings up any other questions or topics people want to hit on.
There's one comment that I thought was interesting. One use case I'd love to see is, what do I need to learn to catch up to what the agent just helped me create? And an extension of that, what does my prompt history reveal about my skill level and any knowledge gaps I should address?
That's a good one. I like that a lot.
That's very interesting.
Let's try it.
All right. And then there's another question, which I haven't read yet, so we'll read it live. I've started to get into the habit of rewinding Claude code history when I have to go through a long plan. I let it do the initial planning, work on a couple steps, then rewind to the conversation, hitting escape twice to clean the context of the conversation, leaving the code generated. This allows me to essentially keep the initial decision-making planning part within the context while using the rest of the context window to work on the rest, work on the features. This works well if the steps are fairly independent. How would SpecStory handle this? Would I lose history when I roll back the conversation?
This is a great question. So you won't lose history when you roll back conversation. One of the challenges, though, of rolling back conversation is all that history is there without, at least at this moment in time, without the indicator of the rollback. And so you end up with too much history is really what happens. And now, as part of that step that we talked about, where you're going through and trying to discover and collect, you're going to have to do some work to sort out the dead chat history that you ended up rolling back from the live. This is a very specific problem that comes up so often that it's one of the things that we're trying to build into the next version of SpecStory to automatically identify which parts of your chat history resulted in live code and which parts resulted in code that's now dead or rolled back. Going back to that first one, though, it's sort of interesting. So I asked it, what does my prompt history in this chat history reveal about my skill level and places that I should educate myself? Good project planning mindset, awareness of modern tooling, process-oriented thinking, understanding of development phases. Yeah, it sounds about right. But where can I grow? Yeah, Python ecosystem familiarity. It's true. Yeah, I am not a Python expert. Down expertise. Yeah, maybe. It's an interesting assessment. I'm not sure if this is spot on, but it does give me some fodder to dig into, learn the differences between pip poetry, pip. Yeah, I just kind of brute forced my way through this. I was like, UV fixes everything, go fix it.
Written in Rust. How can it not?
Yeah. The other thing that really is interesting, Greg, I think you posted on X about this, is like all of the timeframes that come out of LLMs for all this work are still so rooted in the bulk of content out in the world. Like, there's no way that this is a 6-week education plan, right? Like, this is maybe 5 or 6 hours of education. Same thing with any of the estimates that you get on task breakdown. I mean, it's always so rooted in the past. So that's another gotcha to look out for. I mean, I usually just laugh it off, but sometimes it will cause the agent to choose the wrong scoping of tasks, thinking that it can't take on as many as it really can.
Yeah, said differently, you know, you're gonna get these like crazy feature work estimates as if like then you're gonna pass this to a set of humans. When
Yeah.
instead you just pass it to Quad Code Codex, whatever, right? And it's like, okay, I got this done in the session, not 6 weeks. I just find it funny that the models are still tuned to like output that as if, you know, these plans aren't gonna get incrementally executed by them.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens all the time. What other topics, either related to this or broadly speaking, do folks want to talk about? We do a lot of assessment of synchronous versus asynchronous agents. We think a lot about workflows, especially individuals or teams. Are folks on the call working in pairs or teams in any ways, or a lot of folks heads down solo? Curious what I don't know how to ask that in a pollable way.
There has been quite a lot of split of people working solo, but there's been a lot of questions about I don't know offhand who's on the call, but a lot of questions for people who are working in teams ranging from small teams all the way up to like Deloitte size. So there's a pretty big spread here.
Yeah. Yeah. For solo, it's like about how can you create the sense of a team around you, right? So we see people doing what we just did here using multiple LLMs, or in some cases, multiple agents or multiple tools within those agents in order to get that same workflow of separating the creation of a feature or a piece of code from the review of that same code. One team ends up using Copilot for coding, Cursor bug finder, bug agent, bug, I think it's bug finder for identifying bugs, and then Claude security review, right? So like security review is just a slash command inside Claude that you can do in order to review what you just built or something that was built in the past. So when you're working alone, creating a team around you by mixing and matching agents and tools and models can go a long way. When you're working with teammates, as Greg and I know intimately, the ability to write code actually outpaces the ability to communicate and collaborate sometimes. And so the real challenge ends up being, how can I quickly compress my context and knowledge into a format that Greg can take, or more often vice versa. And that's a lot of what we focus on, especially with some of this decision extraction and chat history compression.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I'm obviously a solo dev, but I create a lot of blog posts and educational material, of course, and I use that for marketing things. But it's not hard to imagine how, if I was at a company, how I might be using this to, you know, help onboard or train people instead of uh, kind of sharing to the general public.
Yeah.
There's a question about um, rule derivation and rules being added by SpecStory. Said there was some generic stuff like create new branches, have multiple reviewers that weren't explicitly discussed in chats. Um, so I guess the comment is they'd prefer the derived rules only come from explicit user interactions, and if they manually edit the derived cursor rules.mdc file to delete these rules from there, is a chance there'd be automatically re-added.
Yeah, it's a great question. So a couple of things. One, rules derivation right now, as it's built, one, maybe the most important thing is that you can decide whether to use it or not. So it is turned off by default. You have the ability to turn it on. If you turn it on, you have to sign in because it's going to end up doing a bunch of inference, right? It's going to end up having to process those chat histories to extract rules. Okay, great. So here we are with rules turned on, and it's going to auto-generate them. And right now, what it does is it auto-generates them. I have to probably do something interesting, only for certain agents. So specifically for cursor, for example, and it does not have a human in the loop process, though it should. Of course, you can look at, review, and edit those rules as they're generated, but we want to build a way to make that much more explicit so that rules don't automatically end up in your cursor rules file or in your Copilot instructions. So I guess the current recommendation, use with care and manually review. Nico?
Yeah, I wonder, how do you work in Git and version control in your workflow? Do you commit often or just after a session, or how do you do that?
I commit often. I usually do it, so now would be a natural stopping point, right? So any place where I'm going back or having the agent go back, update the spec and update the README, like that would be a natural commit point. The reasoning, I mean, I mostly just want to not lose the changes. And so I'm pretty aggressive at committing. And for almost all the projects that we work on, we commit our SpecStory histories too, so that we have this like nice, rich, shared set of histories. There's some challenges with that because when you work with a team, you're often on a different branch, but all the histories end up in the same place. But having said that, like if you were to look at, I don't know, one of our real world projects.
And would you have the agent commit, or you do it yourself to not interrupt
Usually I have the agent commit now. I used to do it
Yeah.
myself. It depends on whether I'm cherry picking specific files to commit,
Hmm.
because I care at that level, or more often than not, though, like more than half the time, I'm having the agent just commit everything, the full set of changes.
Thanks.
Yeah. Let's look at, yeah, it's probably got a pretty rich history in here. Yeah. So for a real world project like our SpecStory CLI, which I was just running in order to save Claude Code histories, you can see across the team, like all of our SpecStory histories are in here. We just like to preserve them so that we can do analysis like what we just did. We're also working on a reimagining of what it means to version AI generated code. Like, of course, the code should be versioned with Git and GitHub because that's the universal tool set. But it does not work particularly well for versioning the prompts and chat history that goes along with the code changes. And so that problem is exactly what we're tackling now and rethinking what it would look like to version your agentic chat histories alongside your code. Well, good.
The best question actually so far, Jake, it was from Joe, and he said, "Where can I find the price info about SpecStory? It's hard to find it."
It's free. Yeah, everything that we looked at today is completely free to use. This is our, Greg worked at GitHub, I worked at Docker. Like we've built developer tools before. We know it's important to have a core set of tools that developers can use and love and get value out of forever, and then to build the business on top of that. So we'll price out our team collaboration products, but the ones that you saw today are free to use. Great. Yeah.
Win open code.
You know, we have a so yeah, it's interesting for this group. Like, you know, every single one of these sort of CLIs or agent providers, they have like completely different sort of message data formats. And so, you know, the process by which we get these nice markdowns requires a lot of reverse engineering, obviously, because most of them are not as easy to reason about as like Claude codes are. And open code, what I'll say is one, we have a stub out for how we'd extend the SpecStory CLI extension to support it. But in the short term, because I actually was looking and developing this like recently, like I think when that question first got asked like a week ago, um, OpenCode has a pretty nice way to share and export your markdown already, just in case you weren't aware of it. Um, it's not to say we're not going to support it because it doesn't like auto save for you and you have to like actually hit like slash export. But just so you know, like that exists. And we're gonna push out a release of the SpecStory CLI soon with more than just open code support, but like also AMP and potentially GitHub Copilot CLI. It is very hard to keep all of these things straight, right? Because there's like CLI variants and IDE variants for everything, and some of them also support the IDE and some don't. But yes, it's in the works.
Yep. And Greg, maybe to your point, we're getting ready to also open source the um the connector framework so that people can jump in and
Yeah, actually, Jake, since
build
you're
or
in
help.
the repo, like open up work plans and you'll see that there's like an overview of open code data. This was from reverse engineering it so we can implement it now. So I wasn't just making it up.
Yep. We didn't think you were, but we'll get this out into the wild, open source the connector service provider interface and the implementations that we've done so far. People can jump in and contribute. And then already today, what we looked at in SpecFlow and all of those templates are open sourced. Oops. And we'd love people to jump in and contribute here, especially not just to the templates, but to the overarching website itself, which is in that same repository because it's not quite up to date with all the templates that we just looked at. So yeah, we would love help and we'd like to open up more. Maybe just to wrap it up, and we already got a chance to look at how to use SpecStory to capture, SpecStory Cloud for searching and chatting with those histories, for being able to pull that markdown back down to your laptop whenever you want. And as mentioned or hinted at, we're looking at reimagining version control for AI assisted coding and AI generated code. So if any of these are interesting to you, we'd always love to chat anywhere, in person, on X, on LinkedIn. Reach out to us. We appreciate having the time and opportunity to be here.
Yeah, it was great having you guys. I think this answered a lot of questions that I've had throughout the course around, especially like these templates. I think were something that I want to include more of in the next cohort for sure. So this was great. I think. Oh, comment. I love the templates. Yeah, so those are really great. I think it'd be great if you like them to try and use the templates, see how they work. Maybe if you have a better idea for a template that works better for you, or you might want to change them. Maybe make a GitHub issue with your thoughts of something that helped you more, or post on Twitter or LinkedIn. So this was great.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll leave behind, of course, the slides and links to the SpecFlow GitHub and all those templates.
Yeah, and I have a little bit of inside information on what they're building, so you guys should definitely follow SpecStory because they have a lot of cool stuff coming up. So I would recommend staying in the loop and don't treat this as a static thing.
Appreciate it. Thanks,
So,
Isaac.
all
All
right,
right.
cool. Well, thanks so much. If any more questions come up, go ahead and ask them in the SpecStory channel in Discord. We'll obviously Greg's there, but we'll get any more answered. So we'll continue there. Bye.
Cheers.